You're going to do the introduction, right?
We are back for another session with the Citizens Grand Jury and Prosecutor Larry Klayman. Larry, how are you this morning?
Doing well, Jason, as well as anybody can, living under the hammer and sickle. Yes, doing quite well.
Indeed. Now, today, Larry, we're going to be presenting more evidence to the grand jury. This has become a regular show for us, and I really appreciate the format you've helped me develop here, where we are going to be presenting regular sessions of grand jury hearings. Larry Klayman, of course, founder of Freedom Watch, founder of Judicial Watch, will serve as our prosecutor. People can support Freedom Watch by going to freedomwatchusa.org and clicking on the donate button. Your tax-deductible contributions to Freedom Watch help Larry and his team do the job that the Justice Department not only seems incapable of doing, Larry, but now we have a situation where they're literally persecuting attorneys. This is a very troubling scenario. Where would you like to begin today?
Well, I thank you, Jason. And although this has become a show, at least in terms of putting it on, it's for real in terms of what we are seeking to accomplish. As I've said many, many times, and you can listen to my podcast today as well as many before that in my weekly radio show, excuse me, getting choked up, is that Justice Scalia in 1992, in a case United States versus Williams, writing for the majority, said and found that the grand jury belonged to the American people, not the three branches of government. Repeat, not the three branches of government. In the days of the Old West, and even throughout this country, in addition to the Old West, the American people meted out justice. That was before we had a Justice Department on July 1st, 1870. We have the right, under the laws of nature and nature's God, to try, to indict, to try to convict, and even mete out sentences with citizens' grand juries. And we will seek to do so peacefully and legally. Now, we're in a situation right now where the Justice Department has been co-opted. It's been taken over by the evil forces of the Biden and Harris regime. Notwithstanding the political appointees of the Department of Justice, and I'm also an alumnus of the Department of Justice during a time when it wasn't as corrupt as it is today. It was still corrupt. I mean, I saw people that were on the wrong side of the political fence get indicted, and I saw those who were on the right side, quote unquote, get off scot-free. I write about that in my book, Horrors, Why and How came to fight the establishment. Despite that, what we see right now is a total takeover of the FBI and the DOJ. They've got this brain-dead individual in there named Merrick Garland, previously a district judge in the District of Columbia. Way over the hill, it's clear that his mental faculties aren't really there anymore. In fact, Obama tried to make him a Supreme Court justice. Frankly, given the way the Supreme Court is, it doesn't matter really who you put on the bench anymore. They're a bunch of compromised political hacks by and large, and that includes the Republicans as well, with the exception of Justice Clarence Thomas. But you see them being used as a sword against conservatives, those who supported Donald Trump and others. And at this point in time, with regard to what happened on January 6th of this year,
Call using internet audio.
where many people...
Call using internet audio.
Mute audio, please.
I think we've got a little feedback there, Jason. Where many people were...
So,
Jason, if you can cut the audio,
Yeah, I'm working on it,
grand jurist,
working on
that
it,
would be
Larry.
good. Okay.
Sorry, please continue. Oh, we got Larry. Sorry,
But in
we've
the
got you on
election,
mute. There we go.
who not only were present on the mall, but peacefully walked into the Capitol. And by the way, the Capitol belongs to the American people. Yes, there were some criminals on either side, but the overwhelming majority were good Americans. The FBI is being used as a Gestapo to round everybody up that was in Washington, D.C., to threaten them, to turn over their cell phones. If that doesn't work, they can wind up having a subpoena slapped on them and even indicted. And there have been hundreds indicted so far. And you even see federal judges in Washington, D.C., like Emmett Sullivan and Amy Berman Jackson, making reference to the people who supported Trump as a threat to this country. So it's basically every aspect of our justice system now is stacked against conservatives, people of faith, and those who believe in the Constitution, much less supporters of President Trump. And what we're seeing now is not just a dereliction of duty by the Justice Department, a violation of their oath, the FBI agents and the Justice Department lawyers, in not prosecuting crimes. And we've seen that now for many, many decades. It's not even new to the Harris-Biden administration. There's been nobody held accountable at a high level. Never. Not in my professional lifetime. Never. No one. I think the only one was Scooter Libby, who was alleged to have participated with Vice President Cheney in the Valerie Plame affair, and they got him for lying under oath. But that was the only one. And he wasn't high level. He was just Cheney's chief of staff. If in fact there were crimes committed, Cheney himself would have been indicted, and he wasn't, because he's part of this Washington establishment. You see it. You saw Liz Cheney last night at the speech of Biden walk over and give salutations to Biden as if she's his great friend. It's all part of the establishment. So what they want to do, our current system of justice, not just the Justice Department, the FBI, which is being used as Biden and Harris's Gestapo, as well as politicized lawyers inside of DOJ, but also the judges, the federal judges, and the entire system is corrupt to the core. It's corrupt top to bottom. And that's why I wrote my new book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. Thomas Jefferson predicted, in terms of federal judges and our justice system, that this would cause us to wage a bloody revolt every 20 years or so. He was ahead of his time. Jefferson was very farsighted, the most farsighted of our founding fathers. He was a realist. He understood the way things worked in the real world. And he knew the country would become very corrupt in terms of its establishment. And as a result, that's the reason for these citizens' grand juries. And we're going to see that today. Now, we've already received from our grand jurors the verdict forms, which have effectively indicted Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and James Biden on a massive racketeering bribery scheme, laundering money from Ukraine, Communist China, and Russia. Joe Biden is bought and paid for by these foreign interests. We know that. Now we're flushing it out, and we'll present that to you at the next grand jury session. It's a work in progress. So we give the Bidens notice of the charges against them, and we will then set up a trial. We'll have a judge. We'll have a petit jury that will pick. I will be the prosecutor, and we will seek the conviction of the Bidens. And they'll have an opportunity to come and defend themselves, but they won't, because they don't respect the American people. They don't respect our legal rights. They think they're above the law. And they have people on the Republican side that will even support them on that, because there by the grace of God go thee. The Republicans don't want to be held accountable either. This is a dead, moribund party that sat there. You saw last night, Biden's speech, sitting on their hands, saying nothing, totally being routed by socialists, communists, atheists, and other radicals who are now being represented by Biden and Harris, and they have nothing to say. And they come forward with Tim Scott, frankly, who I couldn't even comprehend what he was saying. I mean, a lot of the words that he used, the American people don't understand. And the very fact that he's African-American does not make him a rising star of the Republican Party. It's theater of the absurd. This is somebody that threw President Trump under the bus. But because he's Black, the Republicans think that he's going to be their Messiah, and this is going to happen. Now, most of my really good friends, in addition to Jason and some others, are very strong African-American conservatives. There are much better African-Americans out there than Tim Scott. Alan Keyes is just one example, who's a brilliant individual. And he's going to be invited to our Third Continental Congress in Philadelphia on July 5th to 6th. But this is the absurdity of things, because someone's black, they bring him forward and they claim that he's the new Messiah who's going to lead us to the promised land. Well, the only people that are leading us to the promised land are ourselves. And that's what we're doing in the citizens' grand jury. And now we're going to get into it, because now that we've got the Bidens indicted, okay, we're moving on to other criminals. And of course, McConnell will be indicted too in the next session. I'll ask for his indictment for his bribery schemes through his wife, Elaine Chao, with communist China. But just in the last week, we see an individual by the name of John Kerry, who a client of mine, Jerry Corsi, revealed in his book about swift boating in Vietnam, was a traitor in Vietnam. Even his people that served with him called him a traitor. And we now know, based upon the admissions of the Iranians, incredibly, that he passed classified information of the United States, which dealt with Israel's activities, military activities in Syria, which obviously are done in conjunction with our armed forces to fight Iranian influence and infiltration into Syria for terrorist means. He passed that information on to the Iranians. Now, that's a crime. And again, what do the Republicans have to say about that? Marco Rubio, who pretends to be this great hawk, who's all talk and no action, little Marco, as Trump used to call him, a complete phony. Well, he should resign. It's not enough to resign. You've just committed a crime, my friend, amigo. You will be held accountable for what you did. So I'm going to have Jason play that first. Okay, and this comes from the mouth of the Iranian government officials themselves. They're boasting about Kerry passing that classified information to them. And then we're going to get into, backtrack a little bit, the involvement of John Kerry's stepson with Hunter Biden. You can see it's all part of the same game. It's all part of the same corruption. It's endemic in Washington. And they think if they can get away with it. And when you see Joe Biden up there last night, calm as can be, no problem. I'm just going to spend another $4 trillion of the American people's money to turn us into a communist state. He knows he won't be touched because it's his Justice Department that won't touch him for anything that he's done. He should use some of the multi-millions that he laundered from Ukraine, Russia, and communist China to pay for what he wants to do. But of course, he won't do that because the money's probably buried in some offshore account. But let's play this clip with regard to Kerry, several clips, and then Jason's going to read a portion of Peter Schweizer's book, which ties in Kerry's stepson to the bribery schemes from Russia, Ukraine, and elsewhere. Now, Kerry's son may have been smart and bailed out at the last minute, but yes, you see the involvement of these families in these various enterprises. It's part of the same crime family on both sides of the aisle. So Jason, play that, and then we're going to get into what happened just yesterday morning with regard to Rudy Giuliani, because it bears on this entire Ukrainian situation, the bribery of Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and also James Biden, because you can see that the Justice Department, again, is being used as a Gestapo to try to eliminate anybody who will oppose this march towards socialism, communism, and atheism, which we're now experiencing today. Now, Jason, let's roll the videotape, so to speak, of exposing John Kerry's latest crimes.
I am Brett Baer. Breaking tonight, what could be a major breach of national security and international relations at the hands of former Secretary of State, current climate advisor John Kerry. It involves what Kerry told an Iranian official about Israel's involvement in attacks on the Islamic Republic's armed forces inside Syria. Democrats are dismissing any controversy. Republicans, as you can imagine, are not. State Department correspondent Rich Edson has tonight's top story from the State Department. Good evening, Rich.
Good evening, Brett. And Republicans say they want an investigation. Some are even calling for former Secretary Kerry's resignation, all in response to claims from Iran's foreign minister in a conversation leaked right in the middle of negotiations over the Iran nuclear deal.
Unlikely that people are messing with
a leaked discussion with Iran's chief diplomat reveals just how powerful Iran's military is.
If we can back it up.
Okay, sorry about that. It was working a moment ago when we had the audio going, when I tested it.
And what John Kerry was saying about one of America's...
On my screen, the mute button.
You got to stay on mute, please. Sorry, Larry, it was working a moment ago.
Closest allies. Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif claims, quote, it was former U.S. Foreign Secretary John Kerry who told me Israel had launched more than 200 attacks on Iran.
No audio? Larry. What the hell happened here? Larry, can you hear me? Larry? Larry? Can you hear me, Larry? I don't know what happened. We had audio seconds ago, and now we don't. You don't hear me, Larry? Larry?
I've just unmuted myself.
Yeah. It's
and can see 4 mutes, including
yes,
the screen that has the broadcast.
Please stay on mute. Please stay on mute.
I cannot hear you. If you're able to hear me, Jason, there are 4 muted individuals.
Yes. You guys should be able to hear me now. I'm sorry. Can people hear me?
We'll need to back it up and start over again.
Okay. Somehow Zoom went on mute for me, and that prevented you guys from hearing everything.
Zoom was created by the Communist Chinese, so maybe some interference.
Here we go. I think you'll hear it now.
I am Brett Baer. Breaking tonight, what could be a major breach of national security and international relations at the hands of former Secretary of State, current climate advisor John Kerry. It involves what Kerry told an Iranian official about Israel's involvement in attacks on the Islamic Republic's armed forces inside Syria. Democrats are dismissing any controversy. Republicans, as you can imagine, are not. State Department correspondent Rich Edson has tonight's top story from the State Department. Good evening, Rich.
Good evening, Brett. And Republicans say they want an investigation. Some are even calling for former Secretary Kerry's resignation, all in response to claims from Iran's foreign minister in a conversation leaked right in the middle of negotiations over the Iran nuclear deal.
A leaked discussion with Iran's chief diplomat reveals just how powerful Iran's military is and what John Kerry was saying about one of America's closest allies. Iranian Foreign Minister Javad Zarif claims, quote, it was former U.S. Foreign Secretary John Kerry who told me Israel had launched more than 200 attacks on Iranian forces in Syria. The Israeli government had no comment on Zarif's claim. The State Department pointed to reports where the Israeli government publicly confirmed the strikes.
Can't speak to the accuracy of it, can't speak to any motives that may be behind its dissemination. I would just make the broad point that if you go back and look at press reporting from the time, this certainly was not secret.
It's unclear if Zarif mentions when Kerry may have told him this information. Congressman Michael McCall, the top Republican on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, says, quote, if true, this reporting is incredibly concerning. Relaying sensitive information to the #1 state sponsor of terrorism is just unfathomable.
Our security partnership in the region is based on the unshakable trust between the United States and Israel. We need to maintain that, and sharing sensitive information like this, if it happened, could really strike at the heart of the bilateral relationship.
The 3-hour taped conversation between Zarif and an Iranian journalist leaked to the London-based news outlet Iran International and the New York Times. Fox News has not independently verified the recorded discussion. It comes as the U.S. and Iran resume tense negotiations to try to resuscitate the 2015 nuclear agreement. Iran's foreign ministry says officials there are investigating the leak.
An absolutely illegal matter has happened.
In the conversation, Zarif gripes about Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani for undermining his diplomatic efforts, even traveling to Moscow to work with the Russians to sabotage the 2015 nuclear deal. A U.S. airstrike last year killed Soleimani. Zarif called it a major blow. Mike Pompeo was Secretary of State then. He tweeted, quote, our administration's exquisite strike on Qasem Soleimani had a massive impact on Iran and the Middle East. You don't have to take my word for it. Ask Javad Zarif. President Biden still thinks it was a mistake.
State Department says this week the U.S. will begin a 3rd round of negotiations to try to revive that 2015 nuclear agreement. A senior State Department official says there has been progress, though there needs to be much more to reach a deal. Brett?
You know, Rich, there are many statements coming from Republicans in various positions up on Capitol Hill about this. The State Department's saying it's no big deal because those attacks were in the press. But it's one thing to read it in the New York Times and another thing to get a call from the former Secretary of State telling you that's in fact what's happening.
And you also don't know what the timing of this all is, Brett. The State Department really not wanting to comment on any of this, just other than that line that you heard from the spokesperson there. But it's still unclear when the former Secretary of State, if he did indeed tell the Iranians this, when he did tell them that.
Okay, we'll continue to look at it. Rich, thank you.
Well, there's an important fact there, and that's there's never been a denial that Kerry told them that. Okay, just the defense is, oh, it was already in the public domain. And although I don't frequently agree with Bret Baier, who frankly is a rhino Republican, he's absolutely right on that. But listen to what the Republican response was. Mike McCall, incredibly concerning, okay? That's because, they don't want their ox gored when they do the same thing, the Republicans, because they've done the same thing. And look at the response of others saying, well, we call for his resignation. What's a resignation? They should be calling for his prosecution. But there won't be a prosecution because the Biden Justice Department's in control. And there wouldn't be a prosecution even if Trump were in control, because he wasn't in control of his Justice Department either. And this is where we are today. And this is why we have our citizens' grand jury. Now, we will be seeking the indictment of Kerry, and we'll be presenting more information next week as it develops. It will be developing. And it's clear that he is guilty. He has a pattern and practice of doing this. He was a traitor in Vietnam. He has been a traitor with regard to the Iranian deal. He was negotiating while President Trump was in office behind his back with regard to that Iranian deal. This is a despicable criminal, and he must be held accountable. Now, Jason, I want you to read for the Citizens Grand Jury the association that Kerry's stepson, the son of John Hines, who sadly died in a plane crash over where I grew up in Philadelphia in the main line, a helicopter crash. Kerry quickly moved in and married the widow of John Hines, acquiring hundreds of millions of dollars. This is another aspect of Kerry. Wow. Very opportunistic. I joke about it sometimes. I say, well, with Kerry, he has 57 visions on the world, most of them to the far left. But let's read this portion of Peter Schweizer's book, Profiles in Corruption, which links John Kerry's stepson to the activities of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden.
Okay. Now we were on, it's funny, it took me to the wrong page here, sorry. Okay, people should be able to see that right now. And we're going to start on the page 2 of this. Sorry, this is a bit unwieldy. All right, we'll just do it like this. People should be able to see. As I change screens with this, it reformats the text. Forgive me, Larry. Everything we're doing here today is the first time in the studio. Had this all set up and I moved screens and it changed the page. Okay, in 2009 is where we're going to be reading from. Sorry, I have to have it here to be able to see it, Larry, so we're just going to...
Yeah, take your time, Jason.
People are going to have to just listen.
Hey, making sausage is a difficult...
It's funny, as I move it from screen to screen, it's changing what it's showing me, so that's very problematic, and I did not expect that.
Being the son of a pork packer, I can understand how difficult it is with dealing with these things.
Where is the page? I think what happens is this online Kindle reader dynamically changes page numbers, and this screen is larger, so it's giving me more text, but I can't read it from that screen because it's too small. Bear with me. I'm sorry, everyone. Okay, here we go. In 2009, Hunter established a series of small investment vehicles with his friend and business partner, Devin Archer. Biden and Archer had been at Yale University together. They launched Rosemont Seneca Partners in partnership with Rosemont Capital.
Jason, let me stop you here. Okay, there's something appearing on the screen. Someone appears to have infiltrated.
No, that's a different screen. This is the whole problem I'm having with, that was John Kerry's Twitter account.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I have to read it from a different screen, Larry. I'll have this set up differently for next week, but I've just learned something about Kindle that I didn't know. But in 2009, Hunter established a series of small investment vehicles with his friend and business partner, Devin Archer. Biden and Archer had been at Yale University together. They launched Rosemont Seneca Partners in partnership with Rosemont Capital, an investment vehicle backed by the Heinz family. Chris Heinz, stepson of then-Senator John Kerry, had been roommates with Archer at Yale. Clearly, this would be an extremely well-connected firm in Washington, D.C. As I recounted in my previous book, Secret Empires, on December 4th, 2013, Hunter was riding on Air Force Two with his father to Beijing, China. For Vice President Joe Biden, effective diplomacy was about forming personal relationships with foreign leaders. It all gets down to the conduct of foreign policy being personal. The vice president had a series of important, intense meetings with Chinese officials on a variety of critical matters in the bilateral relationship. The trip coincided with an enormous financial deal that Hunter Biden's firm, Rosemont Seneca, was arranging with the state-owned Bank of China. What Hunter did during the official visit to Beijing, we cannot know for sure. Other than a few photo ops with his father, he was nowhere to be seen. After the publication of Secret Empires, Hunter Biden, through an attorney, claimed to ABC News that he did no business during his visit to Beijing aboard Air Force Two. However, a Beijing-based company representative later claimed that Hunter had introduced his Chinese business partner, Jonathan Lee, to his father during the visit. Approximately 10 days after the Beijing trip, Hunter Biden's Rosemont Seneca Partners finalized a deal with the Chinese government worth a whopping $1 billion. The deal was later expanded to $1.5 billion. As of this writing, the fund's website says its investment amount is more than $2 billion. And this takes us, Larry, into a portion of the book that we have read previously. I could continue, but I think this shows us how John Kerry and the Heinz family were involved.
Yeah, and it's all part of the same criminal enterprise. And it tells you how the Democrats and the Republicans work together. We've had many other instances of it. We'll get into it in other shows. But that's why they lay off of each other, because they're all playing the same game. They collaborate. They're making money like you wouldn't believe. They're acquiring power. They think they are superior to the rest of the American people. They think they are the new American nobility. They are the equivalent of King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. And I'm suggesting that we not do what the French did, okay, and lop their heads off, but we're using peaceful and legal means to hold them accountable. That's what's so important about these citizens' grand juries. And that's why every Thursday we are getting them out. They're live streaming. They're up on our website at freedomwatchusa.org. They're at crowdsourcethetruth.com. The American people need to know that we have to do something, that we cannot leave it to these criminals in Washington in both political parties to represent us. They do not represent us. This government is illegitimate, and we're going to form our own government on July 5th and 6th in Philadelphia, and we're going to move on, and it'll get a groundswell going, because everybody should realize this. Doesn't matter who's involved, Democrat or Republican, Libertarian, whatever. We don't have a government that represents us. Now let's get to another issue here. And this deals with Ukraine. It deals with the bribery of the money that was laundered from Ukraine into the accounts of the Biden crime family. Yesterday at 6 a.m., the office and home of Rudy Giuliani was raided by FBI agents acting as Biden and Harris's private Gestapo. Interesting that, not interesting, abhorrent, disgusting, in effect in itself criminal, that the FBI would lay off of Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, and James Biden, but at the same time seek to take off the market, that is, grab any evidence that may relate to their bribery schemes. And Rudy Giuliani helped uncover what was going on with the Ukraine and the bribery and the payback of Joe Biden with the Ukraine, where he ended an investigation while he was vice president of his son. We've been through that before. Hunter putting pressure on Ukraine to fire the prosecutor that was going to uncover this bribery scheme from the Ukraine, launder through Hunter to Joe Biden. So they go after Giuliani. Now they're going after Giuliani also because he's been a supporter of Donald Trump. This is a way to get to Trump, obviously. You can expect in the next few weeks, if not few months, that President Trump is going to be indicted for alleged tax fraud and tax evasion by a district attorney in New York City. This is a state district attorney. His name's Cyrus Vance. He's the son of the former Secretary of State under Jimmy Carter. Very leftist political hack. They want to destroy. I call it a full court press, but there's a better word. Any conservative, any person of faith, anybody who stands for the vision of our founding fathers and opposes socialism, communism, atheism, and the rest of the radical ideologies is targeted for extinction, extermination in effect, by Biden, Harris, and the left. And they're now using our Justice Department to do it. And the danger here is it's not just the Justice Department. It's the District of Columbia Bar trying to eliminate conservative lawyers like me, Giuliani, by the way, as well, Ted Cruz, notwithstanding they don't do anything, but they don't even want them speaking, Josh Hawley, Bill Barr, all former presidents of the DC Bar filed a complaint against Bill Barr simply because he withdrew the indictment of Michael Flynn and made comments on Fox News. Kellyanne Conway, same thing, went after her. She's a lawyer. She was even inactive. She wasn't even practicing as a lawyer. They went after her. A communist by the name Michael Tiger with 15 other bar professors. He sits on a hearing committee that I was subject to. Michael Tiger, a communist, an avowed communist, father of John Tiger, who enjoined Trump's asylum policy in the Northern District of California, in Oakland Division. This is a war between the left and the right. And the problem is that from the standpoint of the Republican Party, there's no pushback at all because they just care about making money. That's about it. The hell with the American people. So let's see this report of what happened with Giuliani. And you'll see that while they seized Giuliani's hard drives and cell phones and other records at 6 a.m. in a raid, which was meant to be publicized as a warning to the rest of us Americans not to push back peacefully and legally, even peacefully and legally as we're doing, is that Giuliani offered up the hard drive which contained the emails of Hunter Biden. He had gotten access to it. And Biden and Harris's FBI refused to take it. And that tells you everything. Tells you everything. And you don't hear anything from the Republicans about this either. So let's play it, Jason, and I'll give you the final commentary, and then we'll reconvene next week. We'll keep this one short and sweet, but this is where we are today. We are living under the hammer and sickle of the ultra left and the left, which will try to bury anybody who dissents with them using any means they can. And of course, using the Justice Department is a very heavy means to do it.
All right, we've got another Fox News clip here. Larry, is this the one that you wanted to see?
Let's play it.
Let's get some. I want to bring in now David Lee Miller outside of Rudy Giuliani's apartment in New York City. David Lee, give us the facts as you know them.
I think we're having the audio problem again.
Harris, at this hour we are outside Mr. Giuliani's apartment on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, very well-to-do neighborhood, normally a very quiet residential neighborhood. And as you can see, we're going to pan around here for a second. You can see that there are now more than half a dozen news crews that have assembled here. They are outside his apartment building. We are told that Mr. Giuliani is actually home right now, and that the federal authorities who executed this search warrant in this building behind me actually have now left the scene. According to multiple reports and a confirmation now that we've received from Mr. Giuliani's attorney, the federal authorities did search his home, and apparently they did take away several electronic devices. There are multiple reports that authorities were seeking to look at his phones. This search warrant came about, according to a number of reports, because authorities had been investigating two men who are associates of Mr. Giuliani that are now going to be on trial for connected criminal activity, alleged criminal activity, but that got the authorities looking at Mr. Giuliani's role in the Ukraine. Authorities want to know to what, if any extent, Mr. Giuliani may have been lobbying illegally on behalf of the Ukrainian government without notifying the Justice Department. That is a crime. They're also looking, we understand, to determine what, if any, role Mr. Giuliani had in the ouster of the U.S. ambassador in the Ukraine. The ambassador was someone who Mr. Giuliani thought was not serving the interests of Mr. Trump and the Trump administration, and ultimately the ambassador was ousted by Mr. Trump. And the two associates, I should very quickly add, Harris, that are going to be on trial for unrelated charges to why we're here today. We're looking at what role Hunter Biden and his father, now the president, may have had with an energy company in the Ukraine. Those two associates, Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, are going to be on trial sometime in the fall. So, again, exactly what the authorities are looking for, still not entirely clear, but it is possible to connect the dots and see the direction of this ongoing investigation. Again, we understand Mr. Giuliani is at home in the building behind me. He has not, as of yet, stepped outside to address this latest activity. Harris, back to you.
There you go, Larry. There's one more clip that I'd like to play if you're interested in seeing it, and that's a response from Mayor Giuliani's son, Andrew.
Yes, let's play that. Mm-hmm.
Here he is. This was from yesterday.
Andrew, can you hang on 1 second? Thank you. Let me just say what I'm going to say first here. We'll go from here. Mind you, I'm speaking as a son and a concerned American. Anybody, any American, whether you're red or blue, should be extremely disturbed by what happened here today, by the continued politicization of the Justice Department. This is disgusting. This is absolutely absurd, and it's the continued politicization of the Justice Department that we have seen. And it has to stop. If this can happen to the former president's lawyer, this can happen to any American. Enough is enough. The only piece of evidence that they did not take up there today was the only piece of incriminating evidence that is in there. And it does not belong to my father. It belongs to the current president's son. That's all I have to say. Any questions, you can refer to his lawyer. All I will say is this. To all Americans out there, our Justice Department should be independent of politics. Enough is enough, ladies and gentlemen. We cannot stand for this anymore. And again, if this can happen to the president's lawyer, this can happen to any one of us. Thank you. I'll refer to my father's lawyer for further questions and statements. You guys have a nice day. Can we hear from your dad? Can we hear from your father?
I think he summed it up right there, Larry.
He summed it up, but he was actually charitable, okay? Because it's not just you should be disturbed about the politicization of the Justice Department. You should be disturbed that the Justice Department has acted in a criminal fashion. They have contributed to the obstruction of justice by Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and James Biden. with regard not only to this citizen's grand jury, but generally with regard to any investigation, were it ever to happen, which it won't, into their massive bribery racketeering scheme, where Joe Biden has been bought by the butchers of Beijing, Ukraine, and Russia. And, Biden wants to meet with Putin now. Well, Putin owns Biden. Okay, the same thing happened with regard to Russia. So it's not just the politicization. The Justice Department's always been politicized. It was politicized when I was there in the late 70s. And I say in my book that we should actually pry it apart. In Israel, the Ministry of Justice is independent of the other branches of government. We need that here as well. That was in my second book, Horrors, Why and How I Came to Fight the Establishment. So lots of things that we can be doing. We'll be discussing that at the Continental Congress, the third. By the way, the second one is the one that gave us the Declaration of Independence. We're going to have a new Declaration of Independence on July 5th and July 6th in Philadelphia, across from Independence Hall. So this was really an obstruction of justice, and we'll be adding to the indictment. I presented that to you in terms of counts for that as well. It's Biden and Harris using their Justice Department. Their Justice Department doesn't belong to the American people, to obstruct justice. And in addition to the materials that were seized from Rudy Giuliani's office and home, which contained, apparently, attorney-client information, which is sacrosanct, they also seized the cell phone of Victoria Tenzing, the wife of Joe DeGeneva, and an attorney in her own right, apparently for communications that she's had with Giuliani. And there's another lawyer. They know no bounds. There's no limits. This is a total takeover of this country, and they're using the Justice Department to make sure that no one will rear their head and challenge them. And, it's perhaps some of the difficulties you've been having with your internet and everything else may be related to that too. I've had strange things happening with my phone and my internet. We know that there's mass surveillance. I have been successful in enjoining that in the past through the NSA and other intelligence agencies, but they don't care. And they've continued to violate the law for all Americans right now. So that's what we're living under. And I've often said our founding fathers, when they made their way to Philadelphia to debate and then enact the Declaration of Independence, if these tools had been available to King George III, these mass surveillance tools, if he had had a Justice Department that's acting like it is now, like a Gestapo, the founding fathers never would have made their way to Philadelphia. They would have been picked up, arrested, and executed before they got there. So the situation today is much more severe than we saw in 1776. As I've said before, King George III was Mother Teresa compared to these people. King George III was not a socialist. He was not a communist. He was not an atheist. He was not a radical Muslim. He was not a member of the Marxian Jewish left, and I'm Jewish myself, so no one can accuse me of being anti-Semitic. I'm also a Zionist. He was not a radical Black. He was not a radical LGBTQ, and he was not a radical feminist. And most people in these groups are good people. But the radicals have taken over, just like the Bolsheviks took over Russia and turned it into the Soviet Union, where Stalin came along and killed hundreds of millions of people, of his own people, killed more people than Hitler even. And that is the ultimate risk that we face today, because if we don't use peaceful and legal means, they are out, frankly, to kill us, okay, just like the Bolsheviks. There's no question about it. So that's the severity of what we're living under today. Don't be fooled by phony speeches of Joe Biden last night. If you actually think about it, you'll see where he's headed. He's a tool of the left. He's a tool of those people who have already, in just 100 days, destroyed the vision and creation of our founding fathers. And we are using our citizens' grand juries, peacefully and legally, to hold them to account. I am not afraid. You cannot be afraid. No American can be afraid. Our founding fathers were not afraid. They risked their lives and gave their lives. They pledged their honor, and they risked their fortunes to found a new nation. As I've said frequently, Jefferson and Washington would have been millionaires, even with inflation in today's world. That's how wealthy they were. The colonies were wealthy. That's why King George III taxed the colonies, because he wanted to pay for the rest of his empire. And that's why when we objected to taxation without representation, that he took our legal system back to England and stole it from the colonies. And it's why he went to seize our firearms when we rose up at Lexington and Concord, when we said no. But King George III was nowhere near as bad as the people who currently are in control of our sacred country. So I want to thank the grand jurors for participating. We'll be back next week with another grand jury session. We will have flushed out the indictment of Joe, Hunter, and James Biden. Will be moving on with a new proposed indictment of John Kerry with more information. And we will seek to hold everybody accountable under the rule of law, and then move on to try these people. They'll have notice. They'll have an opportunity to defend themselves. There'll be a judge. There'll be a jury. We will seek their conviction. If we're successful, and I'm convinced we will be, we will sentence them, and we will seek to mete out the sentences peacefully and legally through the strength of the American people as a whole. Thank you for participating. We'll be back next week. Jason, you want to conclude this session?
Before we go, Larry, I want to remind our grand jury members and our viewers that they can watch each episode on freedomwatchusa.org. People can just scroll down the web page and see our previous grand jury hearings. They are all listed here. People can also watch simulcasts of the live streams on the Freedom Watch YouTube channel. Thank you to all the viewers who are joining us there. And you can subscribe to the Freedom Watch YouTube channel. Larry, I meant to tell everyone that Freedom Watch has received its first warning from YouTube. A video was struck and removed, and we are now in a mode where 3 strikes will eliminate the Freedom Watch
Jason,
YouTube channel.
not to overemphasize that, Google, YouTube are getting sued yet again for collusion with Big Pharma. That was simply about my saying that Big Pharma is colluding with the government by not disclosing all of the side effects timely and what was going on. It was extremely benign. Larry Klayman and Freedom Watch don't take things sitting down. So there will be a lawsuit on that, and I'll sue them as many times as I have to. And I'm not afraid. And you should not be afraid either, because we will prevail.
And I want to remind audience members that all of this effort takes time and money. People can support Larry and his staff at Freedom Watch by going to freedomwatchusa.org. Financial contributions to Freedom Watch are tax deductible, so click on the donate button and select a dollar amount that suits you. $50 and up will get you a hard copy of Larry's paperback book. It takes a revolution. Forget the scandal industry. You can also order the book from Amazon, on Audible, on Kindle. You can get it from Barnes & Noble and elsewhere. And I want to remind people that they can support this channel by going to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Crowdsource the Truth and our social media properties are under heavy attack right now. YouTube channel after YouTube channel being removed. So I apologize to people who are trying to find Crowdsource the Truth on the internet. You can always find us on Subscribestar and Patreon. Larry, I want to thank you for putting together another excellent presentation and for doing the hard work that you are doing in recapturing the grand jury as the property of the citizens. I also want to thank our grand jurors for joining us today. And I want to thank you, the audience. We couldn't do this without you. This is a viewer-supported show. So, Larry, thank you for a great presentation.
And let me add one thing too about YouTube to finish this off, Jason. 2 weeks ago, Chief Justice Clarence Thomas, the only one on the Supreme Court that has any degree of integrity, in my opinion, an African American, who understood what it's like to be persecuted. They tried to lynch him with Anita Hill many years ago, and that was Joe Biden who led that charge when he was head of the Judiciary Committee. Said that we had a valid case that Freedom Watch, Larry Klayman, and Laura Loomer brought against big tech under the antitrust laws. The Supreme Court didn't have the courage to take it up at that time. But we will file a new case, and we will keep fighting until we are heard. And if we are not heard, we will put that in front of the grand jury too, because these judges who will not take this up, they've committed crimes too. They had an oath of office to uphold. If they don't want to uphold their oath of office, then resign from the bench and get out of there so we don't have to take action. But they will be held accountable too, because that is a crime too, to subvert the Constitution. Everyone will be held accountable. So that's my pledge to you, not just the citizens' grand jury, but the people of the United States. It's not just what goes on at the Justice Department, but it's the judges who fail to enforce the law, including the justices of the Supreme Court.
And with that, Larry, I want to wish you and everyone a pleasant afternoon.